welcome back to another episode of B Movie Bash.
B Movie Bash. That was really weird.
Oh, you're in for some weird energy.
Yes.
It sounds like. Okay, cool. I'm down.
Yeah. So, took a nap like 2 hours ago, so it was great. So,
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun.
I've got an energy drink in my system,
Wow.
so we are good to go.
We are good to go. All right. This week we're going to be talking about 2011's The Caller.
Okay.
Yes. And it is starring Victoria from Twilight, like the original Victoria.
Oh.
Like Twilight Victoria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So her and her massive red mane.
Yes. Well, I love. So curly.
Yes,
I
it's
just want to touch it.
I know, right? I just, because it just you think, I don't know, like is it like sheep wool? Is it like
Right,
what
it looks
is, or is it
pretty,
really
like, thick.
Yeah, or is
Like,
it
it
like really
looks kinda
soft?
bushy.
Or like, I don't know.
I just want to squish it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's weird because we saw her with wet hair one time in the movie, and it just looked like so like.
In this movie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't remember that from Twilight.
Oh no, in this one, my dogs. I'm so sorry. But it just looks like.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't have a lot going on, and I was like, "There's no way all of that is extensions." There's like, you know,
I
that's
mean, you never know.
you never know, but it looks like it's all her hair.
It does.
So
Extensions are tricky.
yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so yes, Victoria from Twilight. Luis Guzman is also in it.
Don't know who that is.
He's been in a lot of things, but I remember him as from The Count of Monte Cristo, like
yeah, I
with
haven't seen
a very very young.
You told me
Superman.
about this movie?
This one?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay, hopefully not, because here we
I
are.
think so.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay, we'll see.
If
Anyway.
anything, I probably won't remember most of the
True.
details, so
Very true.
it's all good.
Yes, there was a couple things that I forgot about this one too that I was like, oh yeah, right.
Nice.
But we open to a woman unpacking a heavy box from the back of her car as she is moving into her new apartment.
Okay.
And she's moving in to San Juan, California, I think.
Okay.
I think they
That's
only.
a shame.
I know, right? But she's like moving into this building that is like ginormous, and her apartment is freaking huge as well. And I don't know, like I just.
So she must be making bank.
I don't. Well, I have no freaking idea.
Okay.
Because she never goes to work in the movie, but like,
Of course.
but
She inherited millions.
no,
you
she.
know.
I mean, it kind of explains it, but it's
Oh,
like
okay.
well, I'm like I don't know. Anyway, it's just a very like big. It's a very old apartment building
Okay.
with a lot of green walls. So like,
Oh.
yeah,
What
like
kind of green?
like forest green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that'll just darken a room.
I know, right?
up.
I know. I'm watching the whole movie and I was like, what am I looking at right now? So I'm like, it's a good thing that she's a redhead because she's the only thing that stands out right now.
Exactly.
Anyway, so we see her like trying to lift this heavy box, and the building's landscaper, George, who is Luis Guzman, offers to help her with the box. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. And so he brings it into her new apartment, and that's where we meet Dexter, her dog, and her stick bug that is never talked about again.
She has a stick bug?
Yeah, it's a little pet stick
as
bug.
a pet.
Yeah.
In a terrarium.
Yep, and he's kind of like, what the fuck? And she's like, it's a stick bug. They're actually very friendly. And he's like, how do you know when they're being friendly? And she's like, I have no idea. And he's like, okay.
It hasn't run away yet.
Yeah, like, I don't know, but like that's the last we hear of the stick bug.
It
Like,
just
and I
seems
was
like one of those things that like you leave outside. Like
Yeah.
that's not a pet.
I don't know. Well, I'm like, why?
It's
do you-
like, this is my ladybug.
right? I don't even understand why the movie put it in. Like,
Yeah.
I-
She's quirky.
she's so quirky.
She has a stick bug.
Like, and so she offers him a drink, and he's like, no, I'm fine. And he's like, I'm gonna go. And she's like, okay, have a good day. Thank you so much for your help. And he's like, yeah, enjoy living here, you know.
Enjoy your life, ma'am.
Yep. And so she's clearly already mostly moved in. She's got a lot of things unpacked. She's still just like moving some things over and stuff. And she is falling asleep on the couch to a really old black and white movie when the phone rings. And like it's one of those like black rotary phones.
Okay.
You know, like it's not like it's stuck to the wall or anything. So it's not one of those like, hello, operator, hello. Like it's not one of those.
Tucking into a can on a wire.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a rotary phone.
Because she's quirky.
Because she's quirky.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I guess it came with the building. So
Oh, so it's
yeah,
that old.
it's a landline one. Yeah.
Okay.
And she has a cell phone, but I guess because the building's so old, she doesn't get very good reception in there. So she's not like she
Well,
has
and
to
people,
use
it
landline.
was 2011,
Yeah.
you know, so people still had landlines
Yeah.
for a while.
Exactly. And I don't know though, like the whole time I was watching this, I was like, maybe my math is wrong, but a lot of this doesn't seem correct for like, I don't know. Anyway,
Okay.
we'll see. Anyway, so she answers it and it's like, hello. And it's really quiet for a second. She's like, hello. And voice asks like, is this number? And she like glances down at the rotary phone because it's like written on the rotary phone. And she's like, yes, it is. And she's like, is Bobby there? And she's like, no, I'm sorry. He must have moved out. I just moved in a couple of days ago.
Right.
So she hangs up. Or whoever's on the other line hangs up. And she's like, whatever,
Okay.
Wrong call, right? Doesn't think anything of it. And let's see, next we transition to hearing voices talking, and we see that Mary is sitting in a divorce court with her ex-husband sitting over there, you know, and she is just staring at the judge. She's like not even looking at him, and the whole time he's like
staring her down.
Yeah. And except for when the judge talks to him and he's like, yes.
Of course, Judge.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the lawyer's like, Your Honor, my client believes that this restraining order needs to be dropped as it is definitely like a defamation of his character. And the judge is like, I'm not dropping it.
Yeah, it's a defamation of your character because you deserve to have, you did a bad thing.
Yeah, you did a bad thing, right? You're getting divorced for a reason.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I'm not dropping the restraining order. And he's like, okay, well, about the family dog. And she's like, I've already said it. The dog stays with her. Like, and so she's like, I'm not talking about this again. Don't bring it up again. And he's like, okay, Your Honor. And the judge is also like, okay, and where are the divorce papers? Are they finished and signed? And the lawyer was like, oh, there's been a slight delay, but we'll have them to her very soon. And I'm like, oh, great. Is this going to be the whole movie of like trying to get her damn divorce papers signed?
Yeah.
Nope. It's literally like the next scene. She's back at her apartment and there's a knock on her door and she goes over and it's her ex-husband. I think his name was Steven, but like I wasn't paying close enough attention to what his name is, so he's just the ex for the movie.
Sure.
I knew everyone else's name, but like him, I was like, I think his name is Steven. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, he's the one standing there and she's like, you're not supposed to be here. And he was like, what? I'm just dropping off the divorce papers.
Yeah, you can
and
have those served.
Yeah, and she's like, you
Give
are
them to
not
my lawyer.
Yeah, she's like, you're not supposed to be here. And he's like, I just wanted to give him to you, you know, and get a chance to talk.
No.
And she's like, no. And then the dog comes running up and is like, oh my gosh, it's Dad, you know.
Of course.
And it's a super
The
cute
betrayal.
Right. It's a super cute golden retriever, but I'm just like, this is like the dumbest dog of all time because other things kind of happen later on in the movie and the dog is like, huh? Like it's but he's like, I mean, you know, like I just wanted to talk to you. And she was like, no, and like grabs the dog and yanks the dog back inside and goes to reach for the divorce papers and he like grabs her arm really hard and she's like staring at him like, you better like let me go kind of a thing. And he goes, we had some good times, didn't we? And then let her arm go and just walks away. And she just like quickly shuts the door and is like,
oh no, you better get a peephole for that door.
Right?
No.
I know. And I'm like, why? They didn't have a peephole. And I'm like, I feel like all the older doors are the ones that would have a peephole.
Yeah.
But this one doesn't.
Especially in apartment buildings.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
Yep.
Dumb.
So she goes back in and is pulling out the papers to, you know, like see the divorce papers. I never saw the divorce papers. She only pulled out a picture of the two of them from their wedding.
Okay.
And on the back it is written, till death do us part.
Oh.
And she's like, you know. Next we see her, she's at her therapist's office and her therapist is trying to get her out more and stuff. She's like, you know, you need to get out, you need to meet people, you know, and stuff. And she's like, what about work? Are they still okay with you not being back at work just yet? She's like, yeah, they're being really understanding. And I'm like, my job is understanding. My job would be like, yeah, you can have 3 days off. Don't worry about it. You know, like,
yeah.
Because I'm the person that covers shifts for everybody.
Well,
so like,
why do you need time off? Because of divorce? Or are we going to find that out?
No, I just divorce.
Or whatever happened that brought on the protective order, maybe?
No. I mean, all we
She's
know is that he's
emotionally distraught.
all we know is that he was abusive. That's it.
Okay. And like, I
like,
get mental health days. I'm not knocking that. But like, how much time are you taking? I don't know.
At least, okay. And I can understand too if she was like, well, I'm like moving from a house into an apartment. Like, I just need time to move.
Give me a week to settle or whatever.
No, she was gone for like the whole movie spans, I want to say, maybe 2 weeks.
And she didn't work at all.
And she didn't work at all. And I was
Where
like,
does she work?
I know, where
Sign
do you
me
work? Right? Like, so anyway, she's talking to the therapist and stuff, and the therapist is just like, you need to get out and meet people more. Stop locking yourself inside. And she's like, I just don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to do that kind of thing yet. And the therapist goes, he told you that if he couldn't have you, nobody will. And if you keep locking yourself inside, he's going to win.
Will.
Yeah, he's going to win. And she goes, yeah, I guess that makes sense, kind of a thing. So I guess, I'm not sure if that's what made her decide to join a night school or if like she was already planning on doing that or something. But like, yeah, it's just like one of those like local college night school courses that you can take kind of thing. Anyway, though, that's later on. We don't see that for a bit. Back at the apartment, Mary is busying herself trying to fix up her apartment. She's got this air conditioner that stays broken for like the whole fucking movie. And like I feel like they're just only trying to put that in there to make it seem like more and more things are just stacking up on top of her.
Yeah.
And so like
And the apartment is old.
and like yeah. And so yeah, the AC's not working and she's just annoyed and she's sitting there removing stickers from a cupboard. They look like price tag stickers, but like she's just peeling off these stickers and stuff. And she's listening to one of those quiz TV shows like fucking like name, you know, the capital of Argentina or something like that, you know, kind of a thing. And she's just like saying the answers out loud and but she gets it wrong. And there she was like Ireland and they were like, no, it's Scotland. And she was like, that's what I meant. And so I was like, and like everyone in this movie did a pretty good job acting wise. I felt like the plot just fell apart at one point. Anyway,
Okay.
So the phone rings again and she answers the phone and it's the same woman from the night before or whenever the last time she called. And she's like, I want to speak to Bobby. And she's like, I'm sorry, there's no Bobby here. And she's like, I know he's there. I walked past the apartment last night and I saw him in the window. And she's like, listen, I don't know who you thought you saw. Maybe you don't have the right apartment. She's like, is it this apartment? She looks over at her mail and like it says the apartment. She's like, yeah, I don't know what you mean, ma'am. I don't. No, Bobby lives here. And she goes, well, will you at least tell him that Rose will be waiting for him at the diner at 8 o'clock if he wants to see me? And I was like, And she's like, ma'am, there's no Bobby here. And she's like, please, just tell him. And she's like, okay, if I see a Bobby walking past, I'll tell him to meet you.
Sure, lady.
She's
sure.
like, okay, and then hangs up. And she's like, whatever, right? Later that night, she is off to night school, right? Yes. And she walks into a class a little late, and immediately everyone, like the audience and everyone in the room is like, why are you here? Kind of a thing. As you look around and you see that the only other people in the classroom are extremely nerdy looking boys, right?
Okay.
And the professor sees her sit down, and she's a very pleasant looking woman, and so he walks up and he goes, there are rules against discriminating against people based on age and gender, but you know, of course I would not be suggesting that you might possibly have walked into math for stage 2 engineering. And she was like, what? And he was like, when you probably were wanting conversational French in the room next door. And she was like, and she was like, well, I may have been interested in a, you know, or in a career in math. And he's like, for stage 2 engineering. She's like, for that. But conversational French does sound a little bit more fun. So I hope you won't be offended if I go to that. And he's like, no, just a bit disappointed. And so she's like, okay, well, and grabs all of her stuff and leaves. So she just like walked in the wrong class. And I just thought that was a little like funny.
Does
but
that mean anything?
No, well, kind of like it's to show that it's their meet cute, you know.
I was wondering if it was, okay.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Their meet cute and stuff. But I'm like, oh, good, because he's not her teacher then, and there's nothing like. I mean, she's an adult, he's an adult, whatever. But as she like leaves the room, all of the boys start like, you know, and he's like, what? Okay,
shut
get
up,
back
guys.
to, you know, like, and I'm like, clearly these nerdy boys have never even like talked to a girl before, so like you've one up them. Yeah. I don't know, and he at first wasn't like attractive to me in any way. Like I was like, how old are you? I don't know. Like he seems so much older than her. Maybe it's just because she has more of a youthful face, but like apparently both of them were children in 1979 at least. So like, okay. And now it's 2011, and I'm like, that's how many years? That's like 40 years. So they're at least in their 40s. Like, wow, something like that.
A math.
Something. I'm not in math, I don't know.
Too for engineering, so
I have no idea. So like, see, that's where I was like, how old are they supposed to be? Because I don't think the actress is that old.
No.
So like,
yeah, maybe I don't know.
I don't know.
That would be 30-ish.
30-ish, right?
Because the end of the 70s. 79?
Yeah.
But they're children.
Yeah, she was at least, like, they had to be at least 5, 6, maybe 8. Like, you don't get to see them as children, but you get to see a photo of him as a child. I guess you get to see photos of her as a kid, too. But, like, and you know how bad I am with children ages. But, like, she's not 3. Yeah. So she's at least, like, 6 to 8.
Early school age.
Yeah. So, like, you know, so she gets up and she leaves and stuff, and the whole class is like, you know. And so she comes home with her bags, and or like I guess she went shopping right after too, and she gets home, and the phone's ringing again. So she runs over to answer it. And it's the same woman, and she's like, Bobby says he doesn't know you. And she's like, well, Bobby's right. Go check his fucking number, right? And Mary's like, you think I'm mad at you, don't you? But I'm not. He's using you. That's what he does. So obviously Rose is thinking that
he's cheating on her with this girl.
Yeah. And she's like, listen, I normally like talking to crazy people, but I am not in the mood for that today. And Rose is like, oh, please don't hang up on me, please. Like, he said he loved me and stuff. And so she's like, okay, what do you want, kind of a thing, you know? But yeah, so Mary just kind of feels bad for her, and they chat for a minute, and Rose is just kind of going off about how she's like, yeah, he said he loved me, and he even proposed to me. He asked me to marry him and stuff. And she was like, oh, good for you. You're so lucky, you know? Like, and she's like, yeah, but then he got drafted into the war. I mean, he even came over in uniform and stuff. And she's like, war? Vietnam War kind of a thing? Because I guess 9/11 doesn't exist in this world. And so,
well, no one was drafted for the.
I guess it's true,
wars,
yeah. So, yeah, she's like, the Vietnam War? And she's like, yes, of course, the Vietnam War. And she's like, lady, the Vietnam War was like, what, 35, 40 years ago? You would have been a child, right? Mm-hmm. And she was like, why are you doing this? Like, Rose says on the phone. Yeah. She's like, what did I ever do to you? And then like hangs up.
You keep calling me, you crazy.
Right? And Mary is just like, what the fuck? And so she goes to like try to dial the number back, like star 69 it and stuff. But it says that number is not an active number. And she's like, of course it is, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, no offense to Marys out there, but Mary, like,
I know. Well, the whole time I was like, as I'm writing the notes, I was mixing the two of them up because Mary, I feel, is like an older lady name too. Yeah. So like we've got Rose and we've got Mary, and I just kept being like, oh fuck, it's Rose that's talking, like, yeah. And so I was struggling with that pretty bad. Let's see. And so I don't know. I guess Mary goes grocery shopping again. She
needs a lot of groceries.
I know. It might be the next day or some shit. I don't know. But she feels like she's being watched. Like every time she kind of sees someone out of the corner of her eye, like duck behind the shelves and stuff. And she thinks it's her ex-husband who was clearly shown stalking her before, right? Yeah. But it turns out that it was actually the math teacher from the night school. And he bumps into her and like scares the shit out of her and stuff, right? And he was like, oh, hey, sorry, didn't mean to scare you, you know? He's like, I didn't know how to approach you, kind of a thing, right? And
I've just been following you around the store.
Right? And she was like, oh, okay, well, yeah. And he was like, how was French? And she's like, I gotta go. And just like leaves. And he's like, okay, yeah, blew my shot, kind of a thing, right? And so, and anyway, so she leaves. And the next day she's like, there's so many like, it's nighttime, it's daytime, it's nighttime, it's daytime, it's nighttime, it's daytime. Like just so many transitions. So that's why I'm like, there's no way that this isn't at least a 2-week period. Yeah. Like
the passage of time.
Yeah. And so anyway, the next morning she's out in the garden and she's digging up weeds, which I mean, it's not her job, but
at an apartment.
Okay. Yeah. And George, the landscaper, walks up, who is they keep making him seem like he's much older than he is too, because he was an adult in 1979.
Okay.
And I'm like, he's not that old of a dude in 2011. So that's at least like, I don't know. I just don't know. I feel like it was just...
Maybe he was like barely an adult.
Maybe?
I don't know.
I'm just confused because none of the actors are old enough to be the age that they're... I don't...
Maybe it wasn't supposed to be in 2011.
Maybe?
I don't know.
But she had like the flip phone, cell phone, and like just...
And it doesn't tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I'm like, had they like said it was a different time period, I would have been like, oh yeah, that's fine. But like, no, they were very much like, this is 2000. Anyway. Okay. I mean, I guess they didn't specifically say 2011, but like, they did not say it wasn't 2011. Yeah. Anyway. And when she was like, the Vietnam War, which was like, what, in 77 or some shit?
Something like that.
Something like that. She was like, that's like, what, 35, 40 years ago? So like, you count from there. I'm like, anyway. So he comes up and he's like, are you trying to steal my job from me, young lady? And she was like, oh, are you the one who's supposed to be doing the weedings? Because you suck at it. And so you're fired and stuff. And he's like, you know, and they kind of joke for a minute. And I'm just like, oh, friendship. Like, it's just, and like, you never, ever get the hint that she's like attracted to him or he's attracted to her, kind of a thing. Yeah. He just seems like, oh, I'm gonna be the nice, loving neighbor that's the caretaker man. Yeah, and they just have this not like father-daughter relationship, but just like it's just a very like pleasant friendship. I really liked that. I thought it was very sweet. Anyway, so the phone starts ringing and she's like, excuse me, let me go get that. He's like, yeah, you have fun with that, you know?
So are they like, explain the apartment building?
It's like this huge apartment building and the grounds are like fenced in with just a chain link fence. But like, I think that's like the back of the building because the front of the buildings lead out to the street. So they have a front entrance and a back entrance of their apartment.
Okay, so is it more like townhomes?
Kind of.
Okay, so it's not like apartments stacked on top of each other?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that makes a little more
sense.
Yeah,
because like you only get to ever see inside her apartment.
Right.
And you only ever get to see that like her door leads to like a hallway that leads to the door that goes outside.
Okay. So her front door is not to the outside?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like her back windows would be to the outside?
Yes.
Like windows in her house?
Yeah, but it'd be like to like a I don't want to say like a gated community backyard kind of thing, but like where you'd probably find a pool and a other thing like in one of those kind of complexes. Okay. So like I can't even explain these.
Okay.
Like I was confused by it. I don't even know.
Okay. That makes a little more sense though. Yeah. If she was outside her house and then heard the phone ringing, like I was picturing she was like up on the third floor. You know, like
no, and she was on the ground floor at least. I'm not entirely sure if there were more buildings up above, but like they didn't show anything. They never showed stairs leading up, and like I don't know. And it didn't show like stairs in her own apartment, so it's not like she had 2 floors of the apartment or something. I have no idea.
Okay.
But I'm like, but it was a big enough building you'd think there'd be a second floor. I just never got to see if there was a second floor. So like, I don't know. Anyway, so the phone's ringing and she goes inside to answer it and Rose obviously is there and she's like, "What's the date?" And Mary's like, "This is harassment." And Rose replies, "It's September 4th, 1979, and that I can prove it." And she's like, "Whatever, how can you prove it?"
Through the phone. Okay.
Right? And she's like, "Inside your pantry, the big pantry in the kitchen." And she has to say it's a big pantry, which it's a pretty big pantry, not gonna lie. I mean, it's not huge, but it's a pretty big pantry. I kind of felt more like a walk-in closet, sort of a big, you know? But then it also seemed bigger later on in the movie than they made it appear that it was. I have no idea. Anyway, so she goes in and Rose tells her, she's like, "I'm going to draw something on the wall in the apartment, and if it's still there, then you know, like, I did that." And so Mary's like, "Sure, whatever." She goes in and it's covered with wallpaper. So she gets off the phone with Rose and goes over to check and peels off the wallpaper. And I was like, stop what you're doing. Because it was nice wallpaper too.
You
like,
are renting, ma'am.
And so she like peels off the wallpaper and there's a little rose painted on the wall. And she's like, right? It's like a little weirded out. Well, the next morning the phone rings again, and she was like awake like all night thinking about it, kind of thing. She's
also
like,
pause because she did that in Bobby's apartment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems weird.
Right. I know. I'm like, why are you doing?
Like, I get that the apartments are connected and the time and the stuff, but like, you were looking for Bobby and you couldn't get a hold of Bobby, but you did get a hold of Bobby and now you're in his apartment?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I don't know. Weird.
Well, she does see Bobby throughout the movie, I get, but I mean, Rose does, but like we never do. So
yeah.
Anyway, but the next morning Rose calls back and she was like, "Was it there? It was, wasn't it? I drew a rose." And so Mary's like, "Listen, I don't know who told you that was there," because her mind, she's like, it was probably already there.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you know who Bobby is, like, you know, I'm sure like you've been in the apartment, you know it's there. I don't know who's told you that it's there, but like, it's clearly not, you know. Rose is just like, "Well, you can't call me a liar. I had proved it to you. And how do I know you're from the future?" And just like going off about all this stuff. And like, anyway, Mary's like, "Well, I gotta go. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Stop calling me." And Rose is like, "No, there's so many things I want to ask you." And Mary goes, "Carter loses, Reagan becomes president," and hangs up the phone.
Okay.
And I was like,
she's got some spice.
Right? And she was really like snappy
also,
about the...
I know that landlines were still like a thing, but like if it's 2011 and you have a cell phone, disconnect the phone.
She does.
Okay.
But she doesn't get very good cell phone reception inside the apartment.
Right.
So I'm like, then just go outside the apartment to take any phone call. I would rather do that than listen to... Anyway.
Yeah.
So she goes back outside and she sees that George is working on some flowers and he brings her one and she's like, "Oh, thanks," and puts it in her hair. And she's like, "So who lived in the apartment before me?" And he goes, "Oh, it was a really nice Spanish couple. The wife, she made something," I didn't hear what he said. He's like, "It was just to die for. It was fantastic. And she was like, oh, and who before them? And she was like, so what happened to them? And he was like, I don't know. I just woke up one day and they'd moved out. And he's like, I think it was family troubles, but I can't be sure. And she was like, oh, well, who lived there before them? And he goes, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast. I can't tell you who lived there that long ago. And she's like, okay, whatever. And I'm like, I couldn't fucking tell you. Like,
right. How many apartments are there?
Right?
Like, come on.
And he's like in charge of the grounds of everything. Yeah. Oh, so she goes back inside and she's cleaning and she finds an old photo like stuck in the pantry, like underneath the floor, or not underneath the floor, but like under I'm not entirely sure, but she finds it on the floor because she's sweeping and she pulls it out. And she sees a woman and a man sitting at a table from 77 because she flips it over and it says Bobby 77.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my gosh, this is Bobby. Like, he's the one who must have been living here, right? And she's just like, whatever. And goes and sets it down. The phone rings again. Mary picks it up. Rose is begging her not to hang up and that she's so lonely and she just wants to talk. Please, you can't spare 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And Mary's like, fine, I've got 5 minutes to talk to you. Let's fucking talk, okay? And so, like, the whole time, though, she's just, like, banging her head, right? Well, as they're talking, we start seeing a montage of Mary going out and doing her day kind of a thing, right? And she's off to conversational French and the store again and just, like, all this stuff. But we'll talk about what they were talking about on the phone in a second. But as she's, like, running out to her car because it's pouring rain, she gets into her car and she doesn't see him, but we see her ex standing across the street, just standing in the rain. Like, it's pouring on him, and he's just standing watching her, right?
That's not romantic.
Right? As she drives away. But she and Mary are talking, or Rose and Mary are talking on the phone, and just, you know, like, oh, well, are you single? And yeah, I'm single now, blah, 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 and just chatting. And Mary goes, well, you know, this Bobby doesn't seem like he's a very nice guy to you. You know, he's not, you know, he clearly seems like he's not treating you as well as he should kind of a thing. And she's like, I know, but I love him. I just don't know what to do. And Mary goes, well, have you heard of feminism? Because jump on that, you know, and stuff. She's like, it's going to be big. And Rose is like, oh, I couldn't do that. Bobby thinks that's just ridiculous, you know? And I was like, you're not even married. Yeah. Like it's, you're just dating, like you're not even married and you're letting him control you. Like,
I mean, it was the 70s.
It was the 70s, but I'm like, and I don't believe that like your husband should control you, but I'm like, he shouldn't even have that much say. But it's whatever. Like, they were just dating. Anyway, she was like, well, what happened to, like, why are you single? And Mary goes, well, you know, just shit kind of goes down and sometimes I regret leaving him. I honestly should have just gotten rid of him, because he's like still harassing her to this day kind of a thing, right? Okay. She's like, sometimes I think walking out that door was the worst thing I've ever done. And so then they get off the phone and we show Mary Mary's hanging out on the couch, and suddenly, or she gets up to go into the pantry, to the big pantry to get something to eat, and suddenly it is a tiny pantry with a brick wall and like very much taking up most of the room of the pantry. And she was like, what the fuck is going on, right? So she's kind of freaking out for a second, and you think like the cogs are kind of turning in her head, and you think for half a second that she's like, was this my ex? What the fuck? Kind of a thing, you know? And the phone starts to ring. So she answers it, and Rose is immediately just like, I took your advice. And she's like, what? And she's like, he laughed at me. I told him about you and me and how he needs to change, and he laughed at that and said, you know, that he wasn't going to. And so he just kept laughing. So I got rid of him just like you told me to do. And Mary was like,
That's not what I said.
Yeah. She's like, I said I should have killed, like, you know. And she's like, yeah, no one will find him. They'll think that he ran off with one of his tramps.
He's bricked up in your walls.
Yes. And Mary is like staring at the pantry, and she's like, you killed him? And she's like, I can move into the apartment now. They don't care who pays the rent. And Mary is like,
that's not how leases work.
Yeah, for one. And she's like,
no.
Okay. And so Mary like is really upset. She's like, don't ever call me again. So she hangs up, and the phone just keeps ringing and ringing and ringing. So she yanks the plug out.
I know it probably wouldn't work this way, but like I would change my number.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
But
saying.
she never thinks of that, so
No.
she just unplugs the phone and then nails the pantry door closed.
Because who needs food?
Because who needs food? Well, she like, there was no food in there. It was weird. It was like, it was just a stone wall with flimsy shells. Like,
Okay.
it was, I don't know. And the nice wallpaper was gone too. And I was just like, okay. No one wallpapered over. Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, so obviously, you know, like Mary is affecting Rose in the past, who's affecting the future, kind of a thing and stuff. And so, she keeps ringing and ringing and ringing. So she unplugs the phone and is just like, you know what? I'm not even gonna answer the phone ever again. So she's at French class again, but she's like obviously lost in thought about like, oh my gosh, there could be a dead body like on the other side of that wall. But she's like, but I don't want to look and find out, you know, like, because what if there is? But what if there isn't? Like, am I just being ridiculous, you know?
Yeah.
And so, lost in thought, she goes to head back out to her car. And I don't know if it's just a thing that California does that just like randomly pours as much rain as possible and then stops immediately later.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's like bright, sunshiny day kind of. Anyway.
Sounds like Utah.
Right? And so she's walking out to her car and she's trying to get her keys out frantically because it's just raining and she's just trying to get in the car, and she looks up and her ex is sitting in the back seat of the car.
Oh, fuck that.
So she freaks out and runs back inside. And the math teacher is still in his office. His name is John. But the math teacher
John and Mary.
Yeah.
Blech.
I know, right? And so
Gosh.
I know, I'm like John, Mary, Steve, Bobby, Rose. Like,
Someone
just
needs a baby name book.
right. Dog's name is Dexter, whatever. You stickbug doesn't have a name. George. Like,
Yeah.
like his name wasn't even Jorge. It was
Right.
George. Like, so she's dripping wet, comes running into his classroom, and he's like, okay, let me help you. So he walks back out there with a flashlight in the pouring rain, and she's just like, right? And he's like, so how big is this guy again? And she's like, bigger than you? And he goes, yeah, but I'm wiry. Like, he's fucking white. I was like, I love John.
Okay.
Like, he was a great character. I liked him a lot and stuff. And so
Why would you go immediately back out? I wouldn't.
I wouldn't.
I think I would wait.
I would call the
In
cops.
the classroom. Yeah.
Yeah. So she goes out with him and stuff, and he looks, and there's no one in the back seat. And so she's like, I know someone was in there. And he's like, I'm sure someone was, but like, no one's in there now, so you're pretty safe and stuff. And she's like, I don't know. I'm just so scared. And he's like, well, come with me. My family's got a diner. Let's go get something to eat, right?
No.
Yeah. His family owns a diner.
Oh, okay. Of course.
Yes. And is super adorable Italian parents and stuff, right? And they chat for a little bit about their childhoods, and she was like, yeah, I was a Navy brat. My dad came here because of the Navy stuff, yada yada. And he was like, oh, the only reason why my family's here is because my grandpa got on the wrong boat. He thought he was going to New York.
Wait, where are? Did they say where they are?
They're in San Juan.
California.
Yeah.
That's right. Never mind.
And
That's a long boat ride.
and stuff. And she was like, that is not true. And he was like, Ma, is that true? And she was like, the idiot got on the wrong boat and stuff. And right. And so she comes over and is giving him food and stuff. And she was like, oh, do you bring girls here often? And they were like, he was like, no. And his mom was like, no, he's only ever brought one other girl here. What was her name? Ruly? And he was like, Trudy. Her name was Trudy. And she was like, oh yeah, she ate like a horse. And like, she was like, what? Really? And they're just kind of joking about it. She's like, yeah, husband, come here. And I don't remember the husband's name, but she's like, husband, come here. What did that girl eat? And he was like, he couldn't even remember her name, but he was like, she ate this and this and this and this and this and this and this.
Good old Ruly.
Right? And she was like, so what happened to her? And John was like, she exploded.
Okay.
You know, and he was just like, can we not talk about this other girl that I'm clearly not dating anymore, please?
Yeah.
And stuff. And anyway, he's like, okay, I'm gonna walk you home now. Let's get you home and stuff. And she's like, cool, thanks. And the mom was like, oh, I like her. She's so sweet. And I was like, I like the mom, you know. I don't know. To me, their relationship felt like pretty natural. Like they did a pretty good job. I feel like there's a lot of movies where they kind of like rush
Just,
that
like,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that they did a pretty good job, like making it feel pretty natural.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he walks her home and he's lending her his jacket because she's wet still. You know, she
Yeah.
was out in the rain and everything. And he walks her home and she was like, okay, good night. He's like, yeah, good night. Just leaves, like doesn't try anything. Just, you know, nice guy. Just walks her home. And
So did she leave her car at the school?
I guess.
Okay.
I have no idea. And it was like an old station wagon too. And I was like, you moved into your own apartment by yourself. You have an old crappy station wagon, which is okay, I guess. But like, you don't go to work for like how fucking long.
Yeah.
And like, how are you affording anything? Like,
But you're still going to school.
yeah.
So,
But I mean, she's only going for like conversational French. So
well, I
like,
know, but you still have have the mental capacity to go to class,
Yeah.
but not to work,
yeah.
and like the time and the ability.
Exactly. I
Okay.
don't. Anyway. So she walks into her apartment and her ex is in the house. And he's just like, whose jacket is that? And she's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? And you're not supposed to be here, kind of thing. And he was like, well, I keep telling you that you need to check the lock on your back doors. It's a good thing that I came in and not somebody else. And she was like,
no,
get out of my house. Yeah. And she's like, I'm going to call the police. Like, you're not supposed to be here. You have to be with like 500 feet away from me. And she's like, I'm going to go call the cops. And he's like, you don't want to do that because it's going to make me mad. And you don't want to make me mad, right?
Ugh.
And she's like,
that makes me feel yucky.
Right? And the whole time, though, that like it frustrates the hell out of me is that the dog is like, hey, what's up? Like, I feel like even the times that Zach and I are joking around and stuff, and he'll be like tickling me or like picking me up and like we're play fighting and stuff, the dogs are like, ah, like what is happening? You know,
Milo gets riled up too.
Yeah, and it's like you're telling me that he just like, and later on in the movie he like slaps her, like backhands her, and the dog is like,
like yes, it's mom and dad, but like get angry.
Mm-hmm. The dog does nothing the entire movie, and I was just like, this is a bad dog. Anyway.
It's like, this is normal for me.
Yeah, which is like really sad to think if the dog's like, this is fine.
Oh, they're yelling again.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's like, yeah, you don't want to make me mad, right? And then the doorbell rings, and she's like, I need to get that. And he's like, you don't answer that door. But then we hear John on the other side, and he's like, Mary, I forgot my jacket. Can I have my jacket back, please?
It's raining. I'm cold.
So she like hurries over, like she takes off the jacket really quick, and she runs over to the door and opens it, and he's like, oh, thanks, you know, and she's just like staring at him, and he's like, you okay? And she's like looks very uncomfortable, kind of a thing, and he looks up and sees her ex-husband just like kind of looming around the corner, and he was like, sees her looking uncomfortable, sees him and goes, where are my manners? Walks right inside, walks right up, and is like, I'm John, and shakes his hand and stuff, and he's like, oh, hi, I'm ex-husband, I don't remember.
Maybe Stephen.
And is like, he's like, oh, Mary, do you want to tell him that we're busy? And he goes, oh, you're busy? And like looks at Mary, and she's like, not really. And he goes, not really. And looks back at him. And so the ex is like, okay, I'll be seeing you then. And he leaves and stuff. Oh. And so John hangs out for a little bit and is like, are you okay? And she's like, I mean, thanks, you know, like for showing back up, kind of a thing. And he was like, listen, do you want me to like call the cops or whatever? And the thing that like pisses me off about these like strong female characters is that they can't do anything and they always have help. But then as soon as somebody's actively like, okay,
how do we help
we
you?
Should be reporting this to the police because he just violated your restraining order, that means he's going to go to jail. But she doesn't want to send him to jail. Like, I just...
Send him to jail.
Right? And she's like, I can handle this.
He broke into your apartment.
Yes. You have...
And also your car.
Yeah.
He knows where you go to school.
Mm-hmm. He knows where you live.
Your schedule.
Yep.
Don't.
Yes. And there is a witness, a third-party witness, who would be like, yeah, he was at the apartment. I saw him there.
Yeah.
And he would go to jail.
Yeah.
Like, for, I need to ask Zach how long, like, violating a restraining order would be, but, like, they take that shit seriously, you know?
They do.
But, like, it makes me so mad because he's like, listen, I'm going to call the cops, and and she's like, I can handle this. And I'm like, no, you fucking can't, because you clearly just didn't. Like, he had to show up and save you. If you could handle it by yourself, you'd have handled it a long time ago, kind of a thing. I get so frustrated when women are like, I can do this.
Just because you can handle it yourself doesn't mean you shouldn't also maybe probably call the cops.
Exactly. I'm like, call the police. Stop just letting people walk all over you.
That's not handling it.
Right? Ooh, I'm so frustrated. So John is like, I'm going to go take a look at that back door lock, kind of a thing, because obviously it was like either Jimmy rigged open or he has a key somehow, but I don't know. So he goes over with his little screwdriver and he like fixes the lock. And
he's an engineer.
Because he's an engineer, yes. And which, I mean, he fixes her air conditioner later, and I'm like, that makes sense. That's an engineering thing. I don't know if a door lock is an engineering thing. I don't know. I've never taken math 2 or stage 2 for engineering, so like I've barely taken math. But he's just like, okay, well, here's your door fixed at least for tonight, and gives her his number, and he's like, please call me if you need anything. And she's like, okay, thanks. And he leaves, and she's on her cell phone later that night trying to get a hold of the I guess the building supervisor to come and fix the air conditioner, but her phone's not working, so she has to go replug in the phone, right? And so she replugs in the phone, calls the supervisor, and is like, hey, this is so-and-so in this apartment, like, please come fix it. They're like, okay, we'll be there on this day. She's like, great, thanks, and gets off the phone and like goes to unplug it, but it rings immediately. And so she picks it up really quick and she's like, listen here, bitch, I've already told you. And then she's like, oh, hi, mom. And then her mom is like, what is it, Steven, or like the ex and stuff? She's like, no, it's not the ex, it's just, you know. And she's like, okay, like so, but the mom is immediately like, what like, it was great. But she's like, oh, hi, mom. So the next day, she comes home, and I can't tell if she was grocery shopping again or just regular shopping because she had bags. Anyway, she comes home, and she sees that John is sitting outside fixing George's lawnmower, right?
Aww.
And George is like, oh man, he's got like the fingers of a nervous lover. And she's like, what? And like, John is like, what the fuck did you just say? And George is like, feather soft touch. Like, she's like, what the fuck?
What is happening?
And he's just like, no, it's good. He's really good at this kind of stuff. He's really good at fixing things. He's good with his hands and stuff. And John is like, right, I just wanted
Shut up.
He's like, I just wanted to make sure that you were okay. And she's like, yeah, I'm doing all right. He's like, okay, I just, wanted to stop by and stuff. He's like, because you didn't call. And she's like, no, I'm going to call you. And he's like, oh, and she's like, yeah, maybe we can do something sometime. And he's like, okay, then I'll be expecting your call, kind of thing. And then she leaves, and she looks at George, and she's like, you are awful. And he's like, hey, like, he's handsome, date him, kind of a thing. And she's like, George, and I was like, I love their relationship. It's so fun. And anyway, she hears the phone ringing again inside, thinking it's her mom. She goes in to answer it, and she's like, hello. And Rose is like, I saw you and your mommy today taking photos outside the cathedral. And Mary's like, what? And she's like, when I call, you need to answer. You want to stay safe, don't you? You and your beautiful mother. And then hangs up. Okay. And Mary's like, what the
did that happen?
Talking about, right? So she was like, cathedral, and she goes into her old or like some of her boxes and pulls out
when she was a child.
Pulls out her photo album and starts looking through these photos, and realizes that photos that she remembers taking now have like this looming lady in the background, all Insidious style, right? Ew. Like just, and she's like, what the fuck? And is like flipping through all of these pictures of her, just like her and her mother from when she was a child, and this like lady standing in the background, right? Oh, yuck. And I forgot to mention too that Mary's like, or not Mary, Rose is like 41. Okay. So like she's like 80 or whatever in this now. Yeah. Like, yeah. A little upset, Mary goes back outside and she sees that George is still working and stuff. And she goes, who won the World Series in 1979? And he goes, I think it was the Orioles or something and stuff. And she's like, oh, really? And he was like, yeah, they won by this so many runs, blah, blah, blah. Like just going off about everything he remembers. She goes, okay. In the same year, who lived in my apartment? And he was like, what? And she's like, you said you couldn't remember what you had for breakfast. Who lived in that apartment? And he was like, okay. All right, I'm caught. And he's like, well, it was this older woman named Rose. And she was the sad type, and her and her boyfriend fought all the time, always slamming doors, yada, yada. Just going like, just talking about how like he was not a nice guy to her. Mm-hmm. But she was always screaming back, kind of a thing and stuff. And she was like, well, what happened to her? And he goes, well, she hung herself in the kitchen using the phone cord. And she was like, what? He was like, yeah, she was just the sad type. And so I was like, oh,
okay.
And so that's Mary's like, all right. And she goes and does this whole little dumb montage of like trying to figure out a death certificate for Mary, but like can't find one now. Yeah. And so I thought that was really stupid to put it in there. Anyway, so later Mary is at dinner with John, and she's just like, I just need to tell him everything because like this is getting too weird, right? Yeah. And she was like, I don't know what happened with my pantry, and I don't know about this. And John is like, it had to be your ex. Like, he's broken into your apartment before. He's probably just trying to fuck with you.
He just came over one afternoon, bricked up the whole thing.
Yeah, and it looks, 40 years old. It's whatever. Like,
there's probably a body back there, but like,
what? And he's like, are you gonna look? And she's like, no, I'm not gonna look. He's like, you don't want to find out. And she's like, no, I don't want to find out. And he's like, okay. Like,
when you move out, call the police and be like, hey, maybe there's a body in the pantry. Who's to say?
She's like, well, but what about this stuff with Rose on the phone and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, here, this is what it could be. And he grabs a napkin and a pencil and he starts drawing. He's like, this is how we perceive the flow of time. And this is probably like the event that was supposed to happen. But because you talked to Rose on the phone, this still, or like it branches off and becomes this now. She's like, yeah, but why can I remember the pantry looking old? And he goes, probably because the flow of time is more like a pencil line. So even though you've erased it, it's still slightly there. And the only person who can see it is you because you're the one that caused it to be erased. And she was like, right? And I was like, this is dumb time travel shit, right? And she was like,
started on time travel. I know. Don't even give me started.
Time
Okay.
travel, so stupid. Yeah. And so she was like, do you really believe that? He's like, no, it's a bunch of bullshit. And she was like, okay.
Thank you.
And he's obviously doesn't really believe it, but that's obviously what's happening in the world.
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah, somehow. And I'm like, but they never ever explain how the phone works. Like you never find out what happens. Like, you just
have to accept it.
You just have to accept it. This is the way the world works right now. And I mean, I can suspend my belief and stuff, right? I mean, that's why I still had a problem with the lake house with the fucking mailbox. I was like, why?
I've never seen that movie.
Okay, maybe I'll review that one too because that one pissed me off. And I'm just like, no, that's not how shit works.
Okay.
And that one is a fucking time traveling mailbox. So like he puts a letter in, she puts a letter in, like
It goes both ways.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not how. Anyway, whatever. Anyways, but they laugh it off and think that it's still probably her ex just trying to mess with her, right?
Sure.
And so they go on a date later and they go to a super fun street fair with a carnival and carnival rides and stuff and carnival games, and it's a pretty fun. He's like taking her to one of the pop gun shooting knock over the can things. Yeah. And they're just having a good old time, and she wanted to win a bear, but the guy was like, nah, you didn't knock over enough things, here's a hat. Like gives her this fucking red hat. And so she's just like, no, this is fine. He's like, no, we want the bear. And he's like, no, you get the hat and stuff. And like, so they get the hat and she's wearing it, and then they're on the merry-go-round and she tries to put it on his head and he's like, no, my hair. And so like blah, blah, blah. Like it's mostly music going on, so you can't hear everything they're talking about, but like you can mostly read their lips and stuff. And, and so he goes to put it on the horse and it flies off the horse. And she's just like, oh, my hat, and he was like, oh, shoot, sorry, and like, they're laughing about it, and he's walking her back home, and she's teasing him. She's like, I can't believe you lost my hat. I loved that hat and stuff, right? And he's like, I'm sorry, I'll get you a new hat. She's like, nah, and stuff. And so he walks her home, and she's back inside her apartment trying to feed her dog when she hears a knock on the door. Oh, no, she hears the door buzz, because it's one of the buzzer ones that's like, hey, you're in this apartment, right? Come let me
to
in.
the door, yeah.
So she goes out to answer the door, and like spends way too long answering the door. It's a very long scene for a really stupid moment. But she pulls open the door and there's her hat laying on the ground outside. So she goes over and picks it up and is just like, probably just John. Like, he's probably just being funny. Like, he probably found it and brought it back. Like,
He would have said something.
Yeah, he would have been like, hey, look, I found your hat. You gotta let me inside. Like, no. And
yeah.
She goes back inside and is feeding her dog. And you hear like a coin drop in the other room. Like, it sounds like a coin hitting the floor, right?
Okay.
And her dog is like eating away. My dogs would have had a fucking aneurysm if that happened, right?
They heard something.
If they heard that. And so she like grabs a knife and is like, and like goes around and checks her whole apartment. She doesn't see anyone there. And she goes to go lay down and watch TV. But we get to see that there's this silhouette of a woman standing outside under a tree, right? Okay. And I'm like, but how did the coin drop inside? I don't fucking know. Anyway, so she falls asleep on the couch watching the same game show, and the camera kind of pans around and you hear the person talking, and they're like, oh, what is this of this? And we hear the ex say this answer, and he's sitting in her apartment in a chair right next to her on the couch as she's sleeping. And he's just watching the game show while she's asleep. And then like reaches over and just starts petting her head while she's asleep on the couch.
Oh, that gives me the heebs.
Right? But then the next morning she hears the phone ringing and he's not there. He's just gone. So he was just in her apartment.
Being a creep.
Okay. Right? And anyway, so she answers the phone, or the phone rings. That's what wakes her up. She answers the phone, and Mary was like, were you out late last night? And I was like, how would you know? Because the you that was standing outside is the present you. And there's no way that you could have talked to the past you.
No. Unless you have some other weird-ass phone.
Yeah, and like, because Mary can't call. Rose is the one that calls. Mary can't call. So like... I don't know. And... like, she was like, oh, who were you out with last night? And Mary just goes, John, whatever his last name is. I don't remember. The last name was a weird one. I mean, it's not that weird. It's just Italian and there's no way I can pronounce it. She was like, but like tells her who he is.
Yeah. First and last name.
And she was like, brilliant. Oh, I know them.
I'm threatening your mother. Please tell me the man you're dating.
Right? And she's like, oh, I know them. They own the diner on this street. And she's like, I saw you. She's like, I saw you yesterday. And she was like, what? You saw me? She's like, yeah, in a nursing home. home. And I'm like, okay, so you're flat out lying to her right now, obviously.
Yeah.
And she was like, a nursing home? Why am I in a nursing home? Am I sick? And she's like, no, you're just crazy now. And she's like, what? And she's like, all of this anger and like resentment and stalking you're doing kind of like wears you out as you're old.
So, I didn't even connect the fact that you see old lady Rose, so she didn't end up hanging herself?
I guess. But like George remembered her hanging herself.
Yeah, but
so,
that was
like,
then. And maybe something has changed since then?
I don't fucking know. Like
that erased line,
just
is
talking to
there.
Mary, I guess. Anyway.
Okay.
And it's just like, yeah, I saw you in this nursing home. You're crazy now, probably from all the craziness that you've been doing in your life, yada yada. And Rose is like, she's like, yeah, I mean, also with Bobby stepping out on you and doing all this shit. And she's like, stepping out on me? He never stepped out on me. Blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah,
but he's going to.
Yeah. And she's like, who's been telling lies about me? And she's like, none of that matters because you're crazy now in an old folks home. And she's like, but there's still time to change this, Rose. And she's like, no, you could not have seen me there. She's like, yeah, I did see you there. We watched TV and we played cards. And she's like, cards? I don't play cards. And she's like, well, you must have learned and you sucked at it because I beat you every time. And I was like, you are
spicy.
Right? I'm like, you're really good at lying too, right? And Rose is like, no, that can't possibly be true. And then like gets really angry.
Also, who doesn't play cards?
Right? Everyone plays cards.
Like, is that a rule in your life? Like, I just don't play cards?
Right? I know, I'm like, I at least play, like, a few games.
Like, if someone sat down and was like, hey, you want to play cards?
Yeah.
If I'm stuck in an old folk home.
Right? I'm actually really good at bullshit. But, like, that's, like, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I just...
That was just weird.
So she's just, like, upset about it. She's like, I don't play cards and stuff. And anyway, Mary's like, well, there's still time to change this, Rose. Like, you just stop being fucking crazy. And then, like, hangs up on her. She's like, or before she hung up, too, she's like, yeah, I thought about visiting you today, too, and stuff. And she's like, oh, well, just upset about it, right?
Yeah.
The next day, or later that day, or I don't fucking know... Mary's outside and George comes up to her and he's like, what are you doing? And she's making a daisy chain, and which I don't know how to make those. I have no idea.
No idea. I should learn.
I know. I'm like, I sucked at being a child. We made grass nests. That's what you and I
just
did.
Ate plants and,
Jesus.
Yeah. Yes. The little cheeses on the plants. You know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Yes. And the other ones that you just pop. You step on them and pop them.
Don't know.
Yeah,
the little pods?
The pods, yeah.
Oh, you ate those?
No, you pop those ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You step on them and they just...
Yes.
Yep. Anyway, so she goes inside and the phone rings again, obviously. And so she answers it and Rose is like, did you visit me today? She's like, yeah, I just got back. And she was like, how did I look? Anything unusual? And I'm like...
What did you do to yourself?
Right? And Mary's like, no, I'm not sure. She's like, oh, you're not sure? Think about it. And she's like, I'm really not sure. And she was like, oh, well, I've buried something under this tree over here, and you go dig it up. Do you hear me? Dig it up. And then hangs up on her. And like, Rose doesn't hang up on Mary often. So when she does, she's like being serious about it. So Mary, in like a panic, goes and is digging like frantically at this tree, trying to dig up whatever it is, and pulls out this little glass jar. And inside is a note and something else. And she reads the note and it's just like, I knew you were lying to me, blah, 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 because if you had seen me, you'd have said, yes, there is something different about you and stuff. And she's like, okay, what? And one of her fingers is wrapped up. And I was like, that's how insane this woman is.
I thought she had like cut her face.
That's what I thought.
And like left a scar or
right?
something.
No, she cut off her own damn finger.
Okay, Rose.
And I was like,
calm
Rose
the hell
is
down.
that fucking crazy, right? So she calls John and is freaking out about John, right? Or to John, and he shows up and he's like seeing the finger in the jar and he's like, that can't be real, right? And she's like, I don't fucking know. And he's like, this is fucked up and stuff. And she's like, what do I do and stuff? And he's like, I don't know. And then the phone rings. So he answers it and it's Rose. And Rose is like, put her on. And he's like, listen, I don't think you should call anymore. Like, just, you really need to stop calling her and stuff. And she's like, well, you tell her that I figured out who the tattletale was, who's been telling her lies about me. And she's like, what? He's like, I don't fucking know what you're talking about and everything. And so then they get off the phone. And she's like, what did she say? And he's like, something about a tattletale and that she took care of him. And so Mary freaks out, runs down the hallway and starts pounding on a door in the, or like just a different apartment, right? And is screaming for George to answer the door, right? And some lady opens the door and is holding a little baby and stuff. And she's like, can I help you? And she was like, I need to speak to George. Is she here? And she's like, I don't know who George is.
No.
And yeah. And so...
Aww.
Right? And she's like, no, George, like, how long have you lived here? And she's like, I've lived here just a couple of months. We moved in right before the baby. And they were like, well, who lived here a while? Like, who lived here before? And she goes, I don't know. They lived here for a while. I guess they were like a Dominican couple or something. And she's like, but they never officially said what George's nationality was.
Yeah.
So because he was talking about a Spanish couple and then a Dominican and he's obviously some kind of Hispanic,
Yeah.
but like they never said what he was. They never said if he was married. So I don't know if that was who was living there before. I don't know. I'm very
If that's his
like,
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the timeline of this, right? Anyway, and so Mary is like, oh my gosh, like George, she took care of George kind of a thing. And he's like, who's George? And she's like, George, you fixed his lawnmower, like you met him and stuff. And he was like,
Oh no.
I don't know who that is. And so obviously
He doesn't remember.
he doesn't remember. And she was like, you think I'm crazy. And he's like, listen, I think you're going through a tough time right now. That's what I think is going on. And so she's like, oh, and he goes, okay, how about, he's like, you shouldn't stay here tonight. You should like come back to my apartment, like get some sleep. You know, he's like, you've been under a lot of pressure with your ex and whoever this crazy lady is that keeps calling you. He's like, just come back to my apartment and you can sleep. And she's like, okay. And he like even lets her bring the dog. And I was like, oh. Yeah, so she goes and they get Chinese food and they're eating and stuff. And he was like, I think you need to move out of the apartment. She's like, I just moved into the apartment. He goes, I think you need to move out. I think that that's not healthy for you. Like you just need to move somewhere else. And she was like, okay, yeah, maybe you're right.
And your ex knows where you are.
Yeah, like your ex knows where you are. And she's like, I don't know. She's like, I just want to be independent. I want to like get my life back kind of a thing. And he's like, yeah, I get that. But you gotta
do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do, right? Anyway, so he's like, okay, well, you go to bed. Good night. And he like has her sleep in his room so that he sleeps on the couch. And of course she comes out because she believes it's brown chicken, brown cow time. So, and so she like comes out and she's like just kind of walking towards him and he sits up and is like, yes, this is the moment. And I was like, you just found a fucking finger.
You think she's kind of going crazy.
Yeah. And like, she's like, yes, this is the moment that we need to bang. And he's like, yes, this is the moment we need to bang.
Did he say that out loud?
No.
Oh, okay.
But like,
that's the face.
It's just very much like she just like walks up to him all like slow and stuff. And he's just like, yes, this is happening.
Come to me.
Yeah. And so they start making out. And this scene goes on for way too long. But they're doing the hoedown right there on the living room floor.
Okay.
And
get at it.
Right? And they're
the hoedown. Sorry, that took me a second. That was good.
Because they're the brown chicken, brown cow, and you know, so.
Okay. Yes. Farmers in the Dell, if you know what I mean.
But it goes on forever, and they do that stupid, like, wide open mouth kiss that actors do in movies that are just like.
Open mouth on open mouth.
Kind of kisses,
like,
and I'm like.
How that works.
I just stop whatever you're doing. You know, like, they're not even doing, like, tongue. No, it's just like.
Just like
what? And then kiss. Like, I just hate it. I'm like, stop. No one kisses like that. And if you are, you've been taught wrong, and you need to like learn better.
Maybe we're wrong.
Maybe wrong.
You're doing something.
I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I guess if you're not banging teeth, you're doing it incorrectly, right?
Yeah.
So
that's what I hear.
So she wakes up hearing the phone ringing, right? So she, like, her phone, right? The phone. So she gets up and she walks down the green hallway of her apartment to see the phone just ringing and ringing and ringing. And so she goes to reach for it, but she can't. It's like she's trying to run, but she can't move and stuff. And anyway, she picks up the phone really quick. And she sees a flash of a woman hanging herself in a kitchen, and then a little girl with, like, blood running down her eyes, and then wakes up suddenly. So it was very much a nightmare, right? And he's like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And she's like, oh, I'm fine, it's okay. And so it's the next morning, and he's like, so what do you think you're going to do? And she goes, I think I'm going to take Dexter for a walk. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, and then what? And she goes, and then I'm going to go back to my apartment, pack up my things, and give my mom the dreaded phone call, right? Which I'm sure her mother is just like, yes, move back.
Yeah.
You know? But he's like, I think that's a good idea. And she's like, yeah, I think it's a good idea too. And I was like, okay, you guys are cute. But like, it was so long. It was like at least 3 minutes long. And I'm like, that's so long.
We
like,
get it.
We get it.
We know what happens.
You're banging. Okay,
Move
it's
along.
fine. She goes out to the park and she lets Dexter off his leash and just lets him run kind of a thing. And he runs right to the ex. who is, I don't know how he knew they were going to be there, but he was there before them. So like, maybe he was just there,
all
right?
The places she goes,
I guess. But then he's there and he's playing with the dog, and she gets up and she's like, come on, Dex, we need to go. Come on. And he goes, oh, so he's sharing time with my dog now? And she's like, excuse you? And he's like, I just don't think it's fair that he gets to spend time with my dog. And she's like, okay, well, Dex, come on, we're going home and stuff. And so she goes to grab him, and he grabs her and like shoves her against this pole that's right there. And he's like, he's not gonna get to spend time with my dog. And like does that little like face slap thing, and then starts to walk away, and she's like freaked out, right? But then she runs home, and he storms away. So she's back at the apartment, and she's just like packing things up, trying to, get things done really quickly, and her cell phone rings. So she answers it, and it's John, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna be done with class early today. I was I'll be off around 3. Do you want to meet up and we can hang out and stuff? She's like, yeah, okay, I'll see you then. And so 3 o'clock rolls around. She's outside of the...
Why wouldn't she tell him that her crazy ex-husband doesn't like him? Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
I have no idea, honestly. Okay. But she's out there waiting for him, like, on the campus and stuff, and he's not showing up. So she's like, what the heck? What is he doing? So she pulls out her phone, calls him, and it says that number is not in service. And she's like, what the fuck? So she goes to his parents' diner thinking, like, oh, they probably know where he is, right? And because they seem like they're a very close family and stuff. Mm-hmm. So she goes there, and the diner looks very different. It looks more like dingy, less cared for kind of a thing. The mom, who was, like, vivacious and lively, like, just has her hair pulled back and just looks sad, right? Just like looks gray, kind of a look. Just, she was colorful before and just like looks like just gray had been washed over her, right? So she was like, hi, I need to talk to John. And she's like, oh, let me get him. And she calls her husband over, and she goes, oh no, sorry, I meant John Jr. And they're both like, John Jr.? And she's like, yeah, John, I was supposed to meet him at 3, but he's not answering his phone and stuff. And they're like, what the fuck, kind of a thing? And the husband's like, it's okay. And she's like, if you want to see him, you can go to this place. That's where I see him. And so she goes to the address that she gave her, and it's a cemetery. Yep. And she finds his little child tombstone with a picture of him as a kid.
That's not cool.
That's not cool, right? And starts sobbing, and then they do this like flashback montage-y thing of like him smiling and them making love, and him showing her the timeline, blah blah blah, right? Yeah. So obviously Rose killed him when he was a kid, but then a lady is standing right there next to her because she came to visit a grave, and she's like, you're the first person I've ever seen visit this tombstone. Did you know him? And she was like, yeah, I did. What happened to him? And she's like, they're not sure. They never found his body. And she's like, they never found his body? So she runs back to the apartment with a sledgehammer and starts banging down that wall and goes in there and finds the mummified bodies of George, Bobby, and little kid John.
Sad.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
And George got stabbed in the eye. Okay, like the knife was still there. And I was like, oh man.
That's rough.
That's way rough, right? So she's like really upset about it, obviously, right? Because, and here's my thing. Here was what I was wondering. I don't know if this, like, time-wise, what it would happen. What if she had gotten pregnant that night? Oh. Because she still remembers, but is that something like it would affect her?
That's a good question.
That's like one of those time traveling questions that I want to know about.
Miscarry?
Yeah.
Or
would it just be like non-existent?
Just like void?
Yeah.
Also, I guess maybe she saw the final brick wall, but she saw the brick wall before when only one person was dead. Mm-hmm. So does that mean that she like unbricked and rebricked when she killed people, or was that like the final brick wall?
I don't know, because she was living in the apartment, so maybe after she like just kind of killed Bobby and like moved in, like maybe she just like hid his body for a bit, and then but
that's when she saw the wall.
Yeah,
so that's when it changed.
Yeah, so she must have like rebricked it or something.
That's commitment.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. For every person that she killed, yeah. So she's like really upset about it, and Rose calls and is like, she was like, he was gonna take you away from me, so I had to fix that, blah blah blah, like just like going off for a minute about how
does she know,
right? Well, because Mary had told her that she was seeing someone.
Oh yeah,
and that he had answered the phone and talked to her and was like, you need to not talk to her anymore.
True, but she didn't know Rose didn't know that Mary was gonna move out,
but she was like, he was gonna take you away from eventually, yeah. But she was like, but I have someone who's here with me right now. And Mary's like, what the fuck? And then hands the phone, Rose hands the phone over to young Mary.
Oh.
Yeah. And she was like, hi. And she's like, who is this? And she's like, Mary Cree, which is her name. And she's like, what? Listen, honey, you need to leave. And then Rose takes the phone back really quick. And she was like, no, because we're cooking. I don't remember what she said she was cooking. She's like, but we need to be careful because it's a lot of hot oil. Don't you think we need to be careful, Mary? And she's like, yes, please be careful and stuff. And she's like, Mary, you made me pretty upset. You shouldn't be treating me so poorly. And she's like, please, I'm so sorry. Like it is just like, please don't hurt her kind of a thing, right? And it doesn't matter. Rose is pissed off enough that she dumps a bunch of hot oil on Mary's arm. Jeez. And she's screaming into the phone, but then like starts to feel the scar like appearing on her arm. So she like yanks her clothes up and you see the scar like appearing on her body, on her arm and her shoulder and her chest a little bit, and then down her side and like down most of her thigh.
Jeez.
And so she's just sitting there sobbing because she's hurt, but like not hurt, but I don't know, like because it's scarred over, but like she's feeling it scar over, not just, I don't entirely know. But she goes back and is looking at childhood photos, and instead of the other photos that she used to have, they're now her in the hospital all bandaged up with her mother.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. And then Rose calls again later, and Mary's like, are you still mad at me? And she's like, no, Mary, I'm not mad at you anymore. And she's like, are you mad at me? And she's like, I was for a little bit, but I'm not anymore. And she's like, okay, good. Now we can be friends again, right? And she's like, yeah, tomorrow's my birthday, actually. And she was like, it is? Well, what do you want to do for your birthday? And she was like, well, she's like, I remember that it was a really bad birthday. Everyone was scared of what I looked like with my burns and stuff. And I remember we went bowling, but nobody showed up. It was just me and my parents. And she was like, oh, well, I would love to come to your birthday. And she's like, okay, and tells her the address and stuff. But as she's telling her this, we see that Mary had been doing some investigating at the library and found out that that bowling alley had burned down that year, and that like 17 people died inside. And so
okay,
yeah, and so she's sending her to this bowling alley on that day to hopefully die, right?
Yeah.
The next day, the phone rings, and she's like kind of nervous and like answers the phone, but it's her mom, and her mom is like, hi, honey, I just checking to see what time I'm supposed to be picking you up, blah, 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 and stuff. And she's like, yeah, I'll be there soon, blah, 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 just chatting for a second, and then hangs up, and the phone rings again. And so she picks up, she's like, Mom, I just said, and it's Rose.
Yeah.
And Rose is like, I missed the bus, Mary, but I guess that's a good thing since that poor bowling alley just burned down. And she's like, listen, Rose, I didn't know. And she was like, you were trying to kill me, Mary, and was like super pissed off, right? Boy. And is like, well, we're going to have to handle that, won't we? And she was like, no, please, like, Rose, I'm so sorry. She's like, I don't remember what happened for half a second, but she was like, well, you're going to have company today. And then the buzzer for her door starts ringing, and it's old Rose, there at her apartment with a fucking machete.
What?
And like, yeah. Oh, because Mary runs out and tries to lock the street.
The
outside door. Because there's a glass window there. She just like hacks through it with her machete.
So that 80-year-old woman.
Yeah. And like starts like unlocking it. And Mary flies back because she doesn't want to get hit by the machete. And like lands on top of this table, like the entryway table that they had out in the hallway. Mm-hmm. And breaks it and is like, oh no, I'm so broken. And I was like, dude, listen, I've walked into a door before and I feel like I'm gonna die, but like this is life or death. And
adrenaline
filled. And she just kind of starts like down the hallway, like back into her apartment, locking the door. And so she locks her front door, and then she runs into the kitchen and she locks that door, or she tries to or something, and shoves her fridge over and tries to like block it, but she like knocks it on its side, so it's literally like blocking the lower half of the door. But as this is going on, you can hear younger Mary crying into the phone that the doors are locked and that she needs help and stuff. And so older Mary grabs a knife and she's like, listen, honey, you need to get out of there, you need to run, you need to get to safety, because obviously Rose is gonna try to hurt her younger self too. But I'm like, but then why would she be there in the future trying to kill future self too? So like, I don't fucking know. I don't understand the logic of this moment, right? Other than the fact that this is what the movie ends and stuff, right? And so she's screaming into the phone at her younger self that she needs to get away, she needs to get safe, and she's like, I can't, the doors are locked, like she's locked me in her bedroom, I can't get out. And so as this is all going down, like the door is being hacked open by Rose with her fucking machete, and Mary gets up with her fucking kitchen knife like she's gonna go hack back at her, and trips because, stabs the knife into her leg. Because of course. And so now she's injured and can't fight back, right? And so she's like bleeding and crawling herself back into her bedroom because she tries to shut that door and lock it. But like the thing that I thought was really funny was that she had knocked over her fridge to block the kitchen door, but the kitchen door opens in the other direction.
No, it fucking doesn't. Are you serious?
Yeah, but I think she locked it and stuff, and so like it took Rose a minute to
and
get
then
it
she
open.
would have to climb over the fridge,
Yeah.
I guess. So,
But, like,
it's an obstacle, but not a good one.
Not a good one.
I don't know what else you would do, but
I don't fucking know.
so
like
wait,
it just.
I need to rewind for a
Yeah.
second. So young Rose was telling Mary that she needed to get out.
No, older Mary was telling young Mary that she needed to get out of the house.
Oh,
So she's talking to her younger self on the phone. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
And her younger self is very much like 6 or 8, fucking, I don't know, because like the worst fake sounding child voice of all time is very much just like, I don't know, I can't do this. Like,
Okay.
and I went to look up who the actress was that did the voice. I can't find one. There's no like
Because it was just the garbage voiceover.
Yeah, and like it was so stupid. So she crawls into the bedroom, and as she's in the bedroom, Mary starts hacking at the door there and stuff, right? And she's like screaming into the phone that Mary needs to get out somehow, or she needs to find a knife or something, like she needs to defend herself. And she's like, I can't get to the kitchen, there's no knives in the bedroom and stuff, right? And Mary glances over and she sees that there's this really old wardrobe in the room that I guess had been there for 1,000,000 years or something, because it's pretty old, but it has mirrored doors. And so she's like, do you see a wardrobe with mirrors on it? And she's like, yeah, I do. And she's like, hey, kick the mirror. You had to kick the mirror, break the mirror, kick it as hard as you can.
How long is the cord for this rotary phone?
It's like a mile long.
She, like,
so
drags it through
she's
the
like
house.
dragging the whole thing. So
Yeah.
like it's like the cord that goes into the wall
Is forever long.
The forever longest cord of all time. Okay. Like
Just making sure
it just goes. Yeah, no, and I kind of thought that too. I was like, why is this phone cord so long? Because she like drags it into the bathroom too. And like it just anyway, so her younger self is like, I can't do it. Which I'm like, she's a child, I get it, but at the same time I was like,
Do you want to live?
yeah. And so then I guess finally you hear glass shatter on the other phone. Like, it's really hard to hear because adult Mary is like screaming and you keep hearing the machete hacking, and so you can't hear a lot of noises that are happening in the phone.
Yeah.
But like obviously things are happening. And so she's like, she's coming in the room. She's coming in the room. And she's like, do you have your glasses? She's like, yeah. She's like, stab her, Mary. Just stab her. Just stop her. You have to stop her. She's gonna stop you. And she's like, just keep stabbing her. And then I guess she does, because right then older Rose breaks into the bathroom with the machete and is like, I waited for you, Mary. I waited all this time to see you. And then so Mary's like freaking out and covers herself because she's like, I'm about to get macheted.
Yeah.
And then she doesn't, and she like looks up and there's no one standing there. The bathroom door isn't broken down, and it looks like it's a slightly different bathroom door too and stuff. And she's like, what the heck? And you hear younger Mary on the phone sobbing and is just like, her eyes are still open, her eyes are still open. Like, and she's very traumatized and like sobbing and stuff, right? And so Mary is just kind of like, okay.
Holy shit.
And gets off the phone with her younger self, just like hands up her.
Fend for yourself,
Right?
my dear.
And I don't know if she's like having these memories forming in her mind too, because now they officially happened, or
Yeah, now
like
that trauma is set into her brain. Yeah.
Anyway, so she takes a shower and like guess bandages up her own fucking stab wound because she doesn't go to the hospital from a kitchen knife. Like,
yeah.
And it went in a good at least inch.
Yeah.
And like I've been nicked by a fucking box cutter, and I was like,
ah.
I'm gonna die. Like,
yeah.
Or I'm not entirely sure, like, even if she did stab herself at that point, because then there was technically
there was no event.
So I'm like, I don't know. Anyway.
So, okay.
I don't know. So she's sitting down at her kitchen table later, just eating soup, and looks very, like, everything is very robotic. Yeah. So it's almost like she's just kind of going through the motions, right? But then she hears her door buzz again, and she's like, meh. What the fuck? And so she goes and answers it, and it's her ex. And he's like, hi, honey, I'm home. And she's like, you need to leave. And he's like, good to see you too. How was work? Bad day? And like storms into her house and stuff. And I, for like half a second, thought, maybe they live here and he doesn't remember they're divorced or something. Like some event
her whole
happened.
fucking life probably changed.
Yeah, but like apparently it didn't and stuff. I guess it's still the restraining order because like he acts like nothing's wrong, right?
Yeah.
And
So
she's
you're
like,
oh, maybe they stayed together because of whatever happened in the past or something.
but apparently it didn't. And
Okay.
stuff. So like
That was where my
that's what I thought too, because he was acting like nothing was wrong, and so as she keeps telling him that he needs to leave, and he was like, oh, okay, so this is how it's gonna be, right? Backhands the shit out of her, right?
Yes, this is how it's gonna be.
Right?
That's what a restraining order is for.
Right? And so he backhands her, and she's got like blood trickling down her mouth now, and he's like, you see what you made me do? Why did you make me do that?
Oh, no.
Right?
No.
And so he
I
goes,
stabbed a bitch.
Right?
Watch me.
so he gets a beer out of the fridge and sits down and starts playing with the dog and stuff. And she goes, this is your last chance, Steven. And I'm pretty sure it's Steven at this point, right? But she was like, this is your last chance. And he was like, last chance for what? But then it flashes to a different scene of her in the pantry bricking up a wall.
Oh my god. Okay.
Singing a song that Rose had sang earlier in the movie.
Woof.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's how it ends.
I'm sad about John and George.
I know. I was like, George.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yep.
I actually kind of like want to watch that one.
It's a pretty good one. I mean, you can. It's on Amazon and stuff. So, like, I enjoyed it for the most part. I just felt like the time travel-y plot wasn't
There's
very well
always
thought
going to
through.
be holes.
There's.
Yeah. I just, again, don't get me started.
Yeah.
I can't.
I hate time travel things.
There's too many versions of time travel.
Mm-hmm.
There's like the Harry Potter time travel, and there's like Back to the Future time travel, and there's like this doesn't actually affect anything because that's always the way it was.
Yeah.
And this is you rewriting the timeline.
Yeah.
And like I just, I don't like it.
Yeah.
It feels like one of those things that you like latch onto because you can do anything with it.
Yeah.
It's like no one's gonna tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah,
because it's time travel.
Because nobody knows really how time travel works and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I did love that in Endgame when they were like, so Back to the Future is just a bunch of bullshit? Like,
yes, it is.
All of it's bullshit. It's all bullshit. Either all of it's fake or all of it's real or none of it is.
Yes.
Like,
I think I believe the timelines where like this was always going to happen no matter what you do.
Exactly. Like it's a big lake. Not
Yep.
Yeah. We know.
No one else
So,
is
like,
gonna get that reference,
nope.
but we do. That
But
was a
if
fun
you
one.
do, you're pretty fucking cool.
We really like you.
Yeah.
To us, Dea.
Convivium. So.
Anyway, that's a weird nerd part of us
Yep.
that just came to light, but that was fun.
Yeah,
I like that one.
I enjoyed it for the most part. I just felt like that wasn't very well thought through.
Yeah.
Everyone's acting was pretty good, except for the ex. He was so like, I'm the stereotypical bad
I'm the
guy,
big bad husband.
yeah, and I think they just picked him because he was big and scary looking.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's about
That's
it.
his role, so
Yeah,
you know.
but I always have moments like that where like I see these people who like are divorced and they very clearly are completely different people. I'm like, how did you even get together in the first place?
yeah, like what was there
how
that you
did that
thought this
even-
was a good idea?
Yeah, and how long were you married for that this was, just
Also, I get that like till death do you part is like part of the thing, but like if that's your mantra,
yeah.
you're getting divorced.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna die. Like, sorry. But
Yeah.
if you have that written on the back of your wedding picture, someone's gonna die. That's all.
yeah.
So do you have like a rating for this one?
This one had like a 6.4 rating on like IMDb, and
Okay.
I would probably like agree that it was like a 6. It wasn't perfect. The acting was pretty decent. I felt like some of the lines in general weren't believable, but the actors like delivered them in a believable way.
Yeah, it seems like there's like a good humor to it. Like there's some goodness.
Yeah, and I'm so sad about John, and I'm so sad about George, and like
Yeah.
I just
That sucks.
yeah.
Fucking Rose.
Right, don't care about Bobby. Fuck Bobby. But like then there's my other thing too, is that like was that the only like Nexus event, something that like could
Have
time
you been
travel?
watching Loki?
I have, yes, but like could that have been like the only time travel-y thing that existed, or is there a possibility that she could have talked to someone else in the past too and like had that corrected kind of a thing? Like is that,
Yeah, and like why that phone and why that apartment? And
Yeah.
why the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things that I think is supposed to be like, oh, you'll never know because
Uh-huh.
it's weird. But
'Tis
I'm like,
mystery.
okay.
Great.
And I thought for half a second it was supposed to be because Rose had originally killed herself in the apartment. So maybe it was like a ghosty
Like
thing
a haunting, but it's real past.
But it's real past. And so I was like, maybe it's because she died in the apartment that's why it's like tied to that specific phone or building or just...
because it was the phone cord
Yeah.
and the stuff, but still, like,
But still.
that seems like one of those mysteries that they're like, we're gonna be clever and leave it open-ended,
Yeah.
and then all of the people watching are like, can you explain
Yeah,
that, please?
can other people call from the past into the future and change shit? Because, like...
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Cool. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my thing, too, is that, like, is it ever, like, is this such a teeny tiny, minuscule thing that happens that it doesn't affect anyone else in the world? Like, does everyone else continuously live their lives the way they were before?
It seems like it.
Because it seems like it, except for, like, the people that obviously were affected by being killed, or, like, the family, right?
Yeah.
But, like, so obviously the family, they're not happy anymore. They live kind of like a sadder life and shit. But, like, what about his students? Is someone else teaching their class?
Yeah.
Are they just not taking that class because he now wasn't there? I just don't understand time travel.
Yeah.
So, like,
There's too many holes when
too many
it comes
holes.
to time travel.
Yep.
It's dumb. And we could sit and dissect it for hours,
For
I'm
hours.
sure, because I could write out a timeline.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, this happened to make this happen.
Yeah.
This happened to make this happen. Like, I love that shit, but also
Yeah.
I hate that shit.
but I hate that shit.
It's the worst, but I like it a lot. It's complicated.
But I enjoyed it, and I think everyone should watch this one. I think
What's
the
it called
acting.
again?
It's called The Caller.
Okay.
Yeah, 2011. Which is, I also thought it was funny because when it pulled up on Amazon Prime that I was watching it on, it pulls up with the whole, like, the rating of the movie and stuff.
Yeah.
And they rated it PG-13 because of the brown chicken, brown cow, and they said fuck like 3 times, right?
Wow.
And
3
I know.
times. Isn't that enough for an R rating?
Amazon rated it R. So,
Oh,
yep.
okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
So the movie originally was rated PG-13, but that was 2011 rating, and then
Weird.
I don't
Maybe it's like, you know, when movies back from like 1982 have just like full-blown pornos in
Yeah.
them, and they're like, this is PG.
yeah,
This is
just
fine.
a little bit of parental guidance, you know.
Here's 6-year-old, watch Grease
Yeah.
over and over again. You won't get any of it, but you'll like the songs. That was my childhood.
That was no. Look at me, I'm saying
Right? Grease the lightning?
Yeah, which I think it's really funny that everybody, like, because of Sandra Dee, really quick, dumb story, is that Sandra Dee was also one of the main characters in A Summer Place, which is black and white, still back in the day, okay? In A Summer Place, she has premarital sex and gets pregnant, okay?
Oh.
And everyone lost their damn minds about that back then because Sandra Dee was like, oh, I'm such a virgin-y actress. And, like, everyone thought she wouldn't have been in something like that. But then she does in this movie. And everyone was like, that's so inappropriate. I can't believe that she would do something like that. Like, even if it is just a movie. And, like, people were losing their minds over that. And I'm like...
The world is weird.
And now we have TV shows called 16 and Pregnant.
Yeah.
Like,
that's just normal.
that's normal now. Like, fucking, and if you ever get the chance to, you know what? I'm going to review A Summer Place. I'm going to review A Summer Place for bad movies. Yeah, for our B movie bash. That's, yep.
Okay.
Because that movie pisses me the
Add it
fuck
to the list.
right off. Yep.
I love this.
Yes.
Give it to me.
Like, there's not many movies that piss me off, and that is one.
Bring
So,
the fire.
Yes.
I'm excited.
so
Cool.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, guys.
There you go.
'Kay.
Hope you had fun.
Yep.
I did.
Yes, me too.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.